Good afternoon, folks, and welcome once again to Serious Sunday. My name is Luke, and this is the show where I talk about video games and things. I don't typically make it a point to do reviews of my Serious Sunday series. Being a game developer, I find it difficult to be fully objective about issues with a game's launch, since I can see the reasons behind many of a game's issues, but every once in a while, I see a game that I feel is being done a certain amount of injustice, and I think that I'd like to speak out a bit on its behalf. Call this a review if you like. I feel that if I'm going to do one, this is the place to do it. I've spent some time defending other games in this space, like I did Mass Effect Andromeda, which I happily played to the end of the main storyline and most of the side content over a month I had off in April, and enjoyed it most of the way through, but today, I'd like to talk about Friday the 13th, the game. Last week, Friday the 13th's launch weekend saw some very unfortunate server issues, which led to, for various reasons, many of the game's players being unable to play the game. The issue began as soon as the game launched on Friday, May 26th, and persisted through sometime on Monday, May 29th. For those in the United States, this was a holiday, so at the very least some could get some playtime in, but for the rest of us, unfortunately, our weekend was lost, and only this week did we have the excess of free time to play. Sadly, this was the first real downfall of the game, and one of the sadder things that could have happened, since the game is not being judged based on its own merits, but on the lack of a player's ability to have played it. Understandably so, of course, a server error making it so that a player can't access a game, especially on launch week, is frustrating, and players were fully within their rights to ask for refunds if the first few days' experience was enough to sour them entirely on the game. But server issues, for what it's worth, are fleeting. They're fixed now, and you can play if you still want to. I went into detail of the circumstances of the server issues last week on this very segment, so I won't belabor the point, but needless to say, the heavy hit that the game took on its release window has caused some irreparable damage. As I've mentioned in previous videos, the first few days of a premium title's release is key to the overall success of a product. Kickstarter funds aside, this is going to mean reduced sales overall for the game as it falls over the edge of that sales cliff. Looking at Steam Spy, as reliable or unreliable as it may be, the game's sales seem to have peaked around day 5, which is well within the norm, and unfortunately that means that from here onward, the long slog begins as they either continue to push for user acquisition, or the game peters off. I'd like to persuade you if I can, though, to give the game a fair shake, and keep that multiplayer community alive. I've looked over a number of the reviews, especially since the server issues were resolved, and overwhelmingly the complaints focus around the stark asymmetry between Jason and Counselor. Even those who are willing to accept that Jason should be overpowered still cry foul of his ability to teleport with near impunity and his relative ease of killing, whereas the likelihood of the Counselor surviving is astronomically low. People are, in simple terms, upset that they die most of the time as counselors. Which is funny to me for a few reasons. I'd like to put a few counter-arguments forward, and if you come away from this thinking, yeah, I guess so, then maybe I've done good today. Firstly, and perhaps the argument that's most likely to brand me as an apologist of the game, is that this is Friday the 13th, the movie series, the game. If you watch a Friday the 13th movie, which is what I spent my time doing last week while waiting for the game servers to come back online, there's a very solid formula to the films that the game emulates pretty strongly. There are a lot of counselors, generally speaking, and all but one, usually, are picked off by Jason in a creative and brutal fashion before the end. This tells me immediately that, for better or not, the game has been tuned with that very formula in mind. If someone's going to survive, it's going to be only a very limited pool of someone's. In 12 films, Jason's body count is 188 dead to a paltry 21 survivors, about 1 in 10. It's aiming to have that classic Friday the 13th last girl that's defined the series, and to that end, getting past Jason is a rightful slog, and requires that the camp counselors do everything in their power to get away from him. From a player's standpoint, is it right that playing a counselor is essentially a death sentence and you're just waiting to see how long you last? I can see how this is frustrating, but you get plenty of points to level up whether you survive or not, and the question is mostly whether you enjoy it while you're dying, and so far, in my own anecdotal experience, I've had a blast every time I've died. But let's talk about avenues of success. During the week-long open beta of Friday the 13th, when we Kickstarter backers got our hands on the game for the first time, I noticed a distinct opposite. Once that very small and well-informed community of players started memorizing the maps, discussing strategy, and learning how to focus their efforts, there were plenty of rounds where at least a few counselors got away, or at least almost did. People talking about playing Jason were complaining that it was too hard to win. So I start to wonder if maybe, perhaps, the game is just too new. If the meta of the game is so fresh that this now wild west of players haven't yet figured out how to play, and with the added pool of trolls and cheaters, which unfortunately the game has yet to fully address, it's more difficult for players to learn the right strategies to win. Friday the 13th gives you as a counselor 5 ways to win the game. You can repair a car by finding and installing a battery, gas, and keys to one of the 2 cars, which will also potentially save a few other counselors. You can repair and fuel up a boat to escape over water. You can find a fuse and fix the fuse box on one of the buildings to call the police and escape through the front entrance of the camp. You can spend your time evading and hiding from Jason until 20 minutes runs out. Or you can summon Tommy Jarvis, smash Jason's mask, stun Jason by having one of the female characters don Pamela Voorhees' sweater, and then use Tommy to take him down. As convoluted and unlikely a scenario as though that may be. If you have 7 counselors hedging your bets though, communicating, maximizing the chance to get one of those victory conditions, then you're going to see more and more rounds where at least one or a few of the counselors walk away with their bodies as yet unperforated. On my 3rd try since the game released, I managed to get the car almost working before Jason killed me. If one other counselor had distracted him only slightly longer, I may have made it. It was an exhilarating round, and even though we all eventually died, everyone was having fun. And that's the thing, finding people that you have fun playing with. This game, like a game of hide and seek, is best played with friends. I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of gamer friends who joined me. Matt, John, Bud, Aaron, and Pat were all happy to join me on the game, and it was always a good time. Getting a group of 8 together may be tough, but if you can, or at least a group large enough to have fun, 5 or more let's say, and you aren't so competitive that you get frustrated playing a counselor with a target on their back, it's a blast. Before I put this to rest though, let's talk about some of the more contentious game mechanics. Biggest being Jason's morph and shift abilities. For those of you who haven't played the game, that's his 2 teleports. The short version being that Jason can, effectively, teleport right on top of a counselor, even out of thin air and in front of them, and nearly immediately kill them. This is a little bit of a problem, as it does mean that the player on the wrong side of Jason's teleport can feel cheated by having no recourse, no way to hide or run. Jason's just there, and he's killing you right away. I have no fundamental problem with Jason teleporting. He needs to get around Camp Crystal Lake a lot. But perhaps the best change Ilphonic could make would be to prevent Jason from appearing within a counselor's view frustum, or view cone, by displacing him from their field of view, allowing him to always appear from off-screen, though there are some very complicated technical hurdles to leap for this to work, due to server latency and the potential for a player to exploit this by rapidly moving their camera around to prevent Jason from spawning. It could also enforce a weakening of Jason right after a shift or morph, making it harder for him to instantly kill counselors. It's a simpler task, but maybe a little less satisfying. Whatever the solution is though, it's one issue that could be addressed to make the game feel a little bit more fair and, to be honest, authentic. It's not like Jason was just teleporting visibly in the movies. The other major complaint being Jason's near omniscience. At current, I'm willing to entertain the thought that toning down Jason's passive perception a bit could make sense feel more impactful, as Jason can always see a ping from relatively nearby counselors, but this is still a fairly subjective complaint. It's entirely possible that, once again, my companion players were just still fairly wet behind the ears, as it were, and not being sneaky enough. Regardless though, sense is less useful than it has the potential to be because Jason has the ability to track survivals already fairly easily. This does, however, contribute to the feeling that Jason is a relentless force of nature against the camp counselors, so without a lot more experimentation and more experienced counselors to play against, I can't yet comment as to whether this complaint is even valid, or if Jason will eventually need it to have a chance at winning. Regardless, though there are some valid gripes about the game, I can find a strong justification for nearly all of them. If you don't mind a game of lethal hide and seek where everything is stacked against you, and you don't mind losing more than you win, you'll enjoy the game. I'd say that if you're on the fence, give the game a few more weeks to mature while players figure the game out a little bit better and check to see what negative reviews are still saying at that point. From my end though, it's my favorite competitive experience out there right now. As long as my friends are game to continue playing, I'm pretty sure that this one will be a long laster in my group. If you want to get a better feel for the way the game plays, I'm working on an experiment where every Friday I'm going to be airing an A-side and B-side episode of Friday the 13th, the game, where you can watch the game from both Jason and one of the counselors' perspectives, side by side, with commentary from each. To see what that feels like, I'm attaching a link to the YouTube mashup with the description. So come join us on Fridays for gameplay videos, and I'll keep it real with you. If I eventually start to feel like the game is suffering irreparably, I'll let you know. But for now, I'm enjoying every moment of it. Thank you for watching today. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Serious Sunday and might consider coming back to see even more. You can subscribe to us or join us to see even more of our content on level0npcs.com, our channel website. I hope that you'll consider joining our little community of game enthusiasts who both love the playing and the making thereof. But even if you'd rather keep it casual, you're always welcome to join us anytime. And I sincerely hope that I'll see you here again soon. Thanks for joining us, and take care.